The Emperor Vespasian, though sick with the sickness of which he died, did not leave off wanting to know about the state of the empire, and even in bed never stopped dispatching many affairs of consequence. And when his physician scolded him for it as a thing harmful to his health, he said, "An emperor must die standing." That is a fine statement, in my opinion, and worthy of a great prince. The Emperor Hadrian used it later in this same connection, and kings ought often to be reminded of it, to make them feel that the great charge that is given them of commanding so many men is not an idle charge, and that there is nothing that can so justly spoil a subject's taste for putting himself at pains and in danger for the service of his prince, as to see the prince himself meanwhile loafing about at paltry and frivolous occupations, and for being concerned for his preservation when he sees his prince so careless of ours. If anyone wants to maintain that it is better for the prince to conduct his wars through another than by himself, fortune will furnish him with enough examples of those for whom their lieutenants have achieved great enterprises, and furthermore of those whose presence would have done more harm than good. But no virtuous and courageous prince can endure anyone's addressing to him such shameful advice, under color of preserving his head like the statue of a saint for the welfare of his state. They precisely degrade him from his office, which consists all in military action, and declare him incapable of it. I know one who would much rather be beaten than sleep while people were fighting for him, who never without jealousy saw even his own men do anything great in his absence. And Salam one said with great reason, "It seems to me that the victories that are won without the master are not complete. How much more readily would he have said that that master ought to blush for shame to claim any share for his name, when he had employed in it only his voice and his thought, and not even that, seeing that in such tasks the plans and commands that bring honor are only those that are given on the spot and in the midst of the action. No pilot exercises his function on terra firma. The princes of the Ottoman race, the first race in the world in the fortunes of war, have warmly embraced this opinion, and Bajazet too, and his son, who departed from it, amusing themselves in the sciences and other stay-at-home occupations, thereby gave their empire some good slaps. And the one who rules at present, Amrah III, followed their example in making a pretty good start at coming out the same way. Was it not the King of England, Edward III, who made this remark about our Charles V? There was never a king who put on armor less, and yet there never was a king who gave me so much to do. He was right to find it strange, as an effect of chance more than of reason, and let those find another adherent than me who want to number among the warlike and great-souled conquerors the kings of Castile and Portugal, because 1,200 leagues from their isle abode, by the leadership of their agents, they made themselves masters of the East and West Indies, and one may wonder whether they would even have had the courage to go there and enjoy them in person. The Emperor Julian used to say even more, that a philosopher and a gallant man ought not even to breathe, that is to say, they should grant to bodily necessities only what cannot be refused them, ever keeping the soul and body busied in fair, great, and virtuous things. He was ashamed if he was seen to spit or sweat in public, which they also tell of the Lacedaemonian youth and Xenophon of the Persian, because he considered that exercise, continual toil, and sobriety should have cooked and dried up all those superfluities. What Seneca says will not fit badly in this place, that the ancient Romans kept their youth standing. They taught their children nothing, he says, that they had to learn sitting. It is a noble craving to want even to die usefully and manfully, but the outcome lies not so much in our good resolution as in our good fortune. 1,000 have proposed to conquer or die fighting, who have failed to do either. Wounds and prison crossing this design and lending them a forced life. There are maladies that lay low even our desires and our consciousness. Fortune ought not to have seconded the vanity of the Roman legions, who obliged themselves by oath to die or conquer. I shall return victor from the battle, Marcus Flavius. If I fail, I invoke on myself the wrath of Father Jupiter, Mars, Gradivus, and the other gods. Livy. The Portuguese say that at a certain point in their conquest of the Indies, they encountered soldiers who had condemned themselves with horrible execrations to come to no terms except to be killed or remain victorious, and as a mark of this vow, they kept their heads and beards shaven. It is no use risking our lives and being obstinate. It seems that the blows flee from those who offer themselves to them too blithely, and are unwilling to reach the man who presents himself to them too willingly and spoils their purpose. Some men, unable to succeed in losing their life by the hand of the enemy after having tried everything, have been constrained, in order to implement their resolve to return with honor or not return, to put themselves to death in the very heat of the combat. There are other examples of this. Here is one. Philistus, head of the naval forces of Dionysius the Younger, against the Syracusans, offered them battle, which was bitterly contested, the forces being equal. In this he had the better of it at the beginning by his own process. But when the Syracusans closed in around his galley to board it, Philistus, after personally performing great deeds of valor to disengage himself, lost all hope of further resource, and with his own hand took away the life he had so freely and unsuccessfully abandoned to the hands of the enemy. At this point, Moloch, king of Fez, who has just won against Sebastian, king of Portugal, that battle famous for the death of 3 kings and the transfer of that great kingdom of the crown of Castile, found himself gravely ill when the Portuguese entered his state by force of arms, and from then on kept getting worse, heading for death and foreseeing it. Never did a man use himself more vigorously and more gloriously. He found himself too weak to endure the ceremonial pomp of the entry into his camp, which, according to their fashion, is full of magnificence and brimful of action, and resigned that honor to his brother. But that was also the only function of a general that he resigned. All the others, the necessary and useful ones, he performed very strenuously and exactly, keeping his body reclining, but his understanding and his courage standing and firm to the last gasp, and somewhat beyond. He could have undermined his enemies who had advanced indiscreetly into his territory, and it grieved him terribly that for lack of a little life, and because he had no one to substitute for himself in the conduct of this war and of the affairs of a troubled state, he had to seek a bloody and hazardous victory when he had another one pure and clean in his hand. At all events, he husbanded the duration of his illness miraculously in exhausting his enemy and drawing them far from the navy and seaports they had on the coast of Africa, until the last day of his life, which, by design, he reserved and employed for this great day. He drew up his army in a circle, besieging the camp of the Portuguese from all sides, and this circle, coming to bend and tighten, not only hindered them in the fighting, which was very bitter because of the valor of the young invading king, seeing that they had to face in all directions, but also hindered their flight after their rout. And finding all the outlets seized and closed, they were constrained to fall back upon themselves, and they are heaped up not only by the slaughter, but by their flight, Livy, and pile up on one another, furnishing the victors with a very murderous and very complete victory. Dying, he had himself carried and rushed wherever the need called him, and passing along the ranks, he exhorted his captains and soldiers one after another. But when one corner of his battle line let itself be broken through, they could not hold him back from mounting on horseback, sword in hand. He was struggling to get into the fray, when his men tried to stop him, one by the bridle, another by his robe and his stirrups. This effort finished off the little life he had left. They laid him down again, recovering with a start from his swoon, and finding no other faculty left with which to warn them to keep silent about his death, which was the most necessary command he had then to make, in order not to engender some despair in his men by this news. He expired, holding his finger against his closed mouth, the ordinary sign for keeping silence. Who ever lived so long and so far forward into death? Who ever died so much on his feet? The extreme degree in treating death courageously, and the most natural, is to see it not only without being stunned, but without concern, continuing the course of life freely right into death, like Cato, who spent his time sleeping and studying while having present in his head and heart a violent and bloody death, and holding it in his hand.